There's something about birthday dinners. You expect them to be predictable. Candles, cake, maybe a slightly too loud rendition of Happy Birthday, and a few jokes about getting old. Mine wasn't like that. My name's Lucas. I'm 32, and I've learned to read between the lines more than I'd like to admit. Tessa picked a place. A sleek little rooftop restaurant with low lighting, glass walls, and a view of the skyline that made you forget the food was average. We'd been together for almost a year, and despite the cracks I didn't always admit were there, I thought she wanted to be there. With me, we arrived first. She looked stunning, of course. Dark red dress, gold earrings, hairpin just enough to say effortless. I pulled out her chair. She smiled, but something was off. As the waiter brought the wine, she casually said, "By the way, I invited someone from work." I blinked. From work? Yeah, Dean. His dad just passed. He's been having a rough week. I thought it might cheer him up. Then she added with that practiced shrug, "I didn't think you'd mind." I smiled. Of course not. And just like that, my birthday dinner turned into something else entirely. He arrived 10 minutes later. Confident, clean-shaven, slim black suit, no tie, just enough rebellion to seem charming, not enough to be rude. "Dean," he said, shaking my hand, "heard a lot about you, man." I smiled. Only good things, I hope. Tessa laughed, too quickly, and then they locked eyes, a second too long. Dinner started. Conversation flowed, mostly between the two of them. I watched, silent at times, sipping wine like it was giving me answers. Dean told a story about something that happened at the office. Tessa finished the sentence for him. They laughed in sync. Not once, not twice, enough for a rhythm to form. Inside jokes I was never part of. When I leaned in to brush her hand, she flinched slightly, reached for her water. Then dessert came. The waiter brought out the cake, with a sparkler on top. "Happy Birthday, Lucas," written in perfect script. Tessa clapped. Dean cheered. She cut the cake, handed me a slice, then without hesitation, cut another and handed it to Dean. He smiled. "Thanks, Tess." Tess. I'd never even heard him call her that before. She smiled back, soft, familiar. And then, the moment that should have shattered me, he fed her a bite. Casual, bold. His fork, her lips. She didn't even flinch. I set my fork down, lifted my glass, smiled. "You two look good together," I said calmly, almost like a real couple. Their faces dropped. Tessa laughed nervously. "Don't be weird, babe." "No worries," I said, shrugging. "It's my birthday. I'm just taking it all in." And I was. She thought I was too distracted to see, but I saw everything. I once read that betrayal doesn't feel like a knife. It feels like warmth at first, familiar, comforting, until you realize it's bleeding you out from the inside. That's how it felt, sitting across from Tessa and Dean, watching them sip wine and flirt with their eyes, thinking I hadn't noticed. They didn't know I'd been studying them for weeks. It started small. A missed call here, a ghosted text there. Then one evening, she came home late, said the client dinner went long, but she smelled like sandalwood cologne and wine I hadn't bought. Her lipstick was gone, but her blush was fresh. I didn't ask questions. I started paying attention instead. Now, watching her feed him cake at my birthday dinner, I almost admired the boldness. Tessa had always been careful, precise, calculated in everything from her outfits to her apologies. But now, she was careless, confident, like the rules no longer applied. Dean wiped a bit of frosting from her lip with his thumb. "Sorry," he laughed. "Didn't mean to make a mess." "It's fine," Tessa smiled, barely glancing at me. I leaned back in my chair and tilted my head. "So, Dean," I said, swirling the last of my wine, "how long have you and Tessa been working together?" He looked at her, then at me. Just over 7 months, right?" I nodded. "Interesting. I remember that week. That's when she started coming home with those amazing stories." Dean raised an eyebrow. "Stories?" "Yeah, about this genius new guy at the office." I smiled. Tessa laughed nervously. Lucas, don't be weird. I shrugged. Weird? Come on. I'm just saying she talked about you a lot. Always Dean said this. Dean, fix that. At some point, I figured you were either her work husband or, I let the sentence hang, unfinished. They both went quiet for a second too long. Dean looked down at his plate. Tessa avoided my gaze. Bingo. Then, just to press a little further, I leaned in and asked, Hey, Tess, remember that weekend in March you went to your mom's? Yeah, she said cautiously. Weird thing, I said, tapping my phone on the table. The location tag on your Insta story was a hotel, not your mom's neighborhood. Her face paled. Dean looked like he wanted to vanish into his slice of cake. Tessa quickly replied, It was just a mistake. I stopped by a friend for coffee on the way. Why are you even checking my location? Why were you lying about where you were? I replied, my voice still even, still calm. Silence. She looked furious. Not sorry. Furious. And that's how I knew for sure. Guilt hides. Arrogance shows up in red lipstick and heels. I smiled again and leaned back in my seat. Anyway, no big deal. It's my birthday, right? I raised my glass. Let's just enjoy the evening. Tessa tried to match my energy, laughing a little too loud. Dean followed her lead, but both of them knew something had shifted. They thought they'd won. They thought I was done, but I hadn't even started. Tessa thought she brought the surprise to my birthday. She didn't know I arrived an hour earlier. Didn't know I'd shaken hands with the manager, slipped him a crisp 50-pound note, and asked, Mind if I check the security layout? You used to do some freelance work with your security contractor. Didn't know I'd stepped into the control room and whispered, Camera 4, it's the one pointed at table 6, right? He nodded. I nodded back. The screen blinked. There she was, Tessa, adjusting her lipstick, checking her phone, waiting for Dean. By the time they arrived, the footage had already begun rolling. I sat at the bar nearby, watching them in grainy black and white. Dean touched her waist. She didn't flinch. She smiled when he sat down. She smiled more than she ever did with me. I slid the flash drive into the console. Copy, save, eject. Slipped it into the inside pocket of my blazer, right behind my cufflinks. When I finally walked over and greeted them, I was already armed. They just didn't know it yet. Over dinner, I kept the charm alive, joked with Dean, raised a toast, all while rewinding moments in my head. Little signs, little slips, each caught on camera. She thought this was her victory lap. She brought him here to this place on my night, thinking I'd be too polite to make a scene. She was right. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to make a point. And I wanted witnesses. The waiter cleared the plates. Cake was served. Forks clinked against porcelain. Did you like the red velvet? Tessa asked, feigning sweetness. It was revealing, I said, sipping water. She cocked her head. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I smiled, just thinking about how some things taste better the second time around, like the truth. Dean shifted in his seat. Tessa blinked too fast. That's when I placed a flash drive on the table, gently, casually, right next to the wine glass. You ever wonder how detailed restaurant CCTV can be? I said. Her face went blank. Dean's turned ghost white. You see, I continued, this place, they got cameras that can pick up the wrinkles on a linen napkin, or the way someone touches someone else's hand when they think no one's watching. Tessa opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. I leaned forward just enough. My voice lowered, not with anger, but control. You played your game. I just added a scoreboard. The dinner wrapped up with a bittersweet glaze of false civility. Tessa leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, too soft, too careful, like she was making sure to check a box. Dean gave me a limp handshake, eyes darting like he knew something was off but couldn't name it. Thanks for the invite, man, he said. Of course, I replied, smiling like a man holding the final card. They stood to leave, grabbing their coats. Wait, I said, still seated, adjusting my cufflinks. Before you go, just one thing. I nodded to the waiter, like clockwork. He stepped away and returned with a manager, a man I hadn't seen in years, but who still owed me a favor from back when I fixed his system for free. "Is it ready?" I asked. He nodded. I handed him the flash drive. "Play the one called Evening Recap. Full screen, full volume." The restaurant's lounge was buzzing. A pianist playing slow jazz in the corner, couples whispering over wine, and a birthday cake still melting slightly under candlelight. The moment the screen lit up, the room dimmed around it. The sound faded. The pianist stopped playing. Something about a screen in a restaurant always pulls the eyes of strangers. And then, the video began. Scene 1, Tessa, laughing too loudly, leaning in too close, her fingers grazing Dean's wrist. Scene 2, a shared glance across the table when they thought I was looking away. Scene 3, her hand disappearing under the table, his arm following. Their expressions. The footage was black and white, grainy, but emotion doesn't need resolution. Scene 4, the cake. She fed it to him, not me. The frosting smeared across his lips, her thumb brushing it off. I'd edited the video to move like a trailer. Slow motion in just the right moments, tiny zooms on smiles that meant too much. 3 minutes, just 3 minutes. The room fell into stunned silence. A woman at the next table put her hand to her mouth. A man by the bar whispered, "Jesus, that's his girlfriend?" Even the bartender leaned in, glass forgotten in his hand. Tessa stood frozen, wine glass still between her fingers, trembling slightly. Dean? Dean stepped back from her, as if the floor beneath her might explode. I finally rose from my chair, took a deep breath, clinked my spoon to the side of my water glass. "Hi, everyone," I said. "Apologies for the unplanned entertainment, but birthdays are for surprises, right?" Tessa turned to me, pale as bone. "Lucas, Sure," I interrupted softly. "We all just watched the same movie. No need for commentary." Dean opened his mouth. "You too," I added. "Best supporting actor, though." The manager handed me back the flash drive. I slipped it into my pocket, nodded to the stunned guests, and looked at the 2 people I once thought I knew. "Thanks for the memories," I said. "This birthday will be hard to top." Then I turned and walked out. I didn't need dessert. I already had my closure. The morning after the video went viral, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Notifications flooded in from strangers, friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. The footage was everywhere, on social media, news sites, even in group chats at work. Tessa tried calling me twice before I finally picked up. Her voice trembled, thick with desperation. "Lucas, please." I can explain. It wasn't what it looked like, but I had already made my decision. I was done listening to her lies. I told her calmly, "There's nothing left to explain, Tessa. I saw everything. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." By noon, Dean was suspended from work pending investigation. His colleagues whispered behind his back. And Tessa? Her carefully crafted image, the perfect girlfriend, the devoted partner, was shattered in an instant. I didn't seek revenge beyond that viral video. I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted the truth to be seen. Nothing more. I wanted to move on. Quiet. Clean. 7 years passed. I didn't expect to see her again. Life had moved on. Or so I thought. One rainy afternoon, walking down a crowded street, I spotted her. Tessa. She was with another man, laughing. The same practiced smile still there, but somehow more forced. She caught my eye for a brief second before quickly looking away, pretending not to know me. I kept walking. Later that week, I went back to that same rooftop restaurant, the place where it all unfolded. This time, I sat alone. The waiter came over, recognizing me instantly. "Back again, Lucas?" Same table. I shook my head, my eyes scanning the empty seat across from me. "Table for one." He gave me a curious look. I smiled softly. "Let's keep the seat empty." I liked the reminder. Pouring my wine, he nodded without a word. Some wounds don't heal overnight. Some betrayals leave empty spaces that never quite fill. But sometimes, revenge doesn't need fireworks or shouting. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the empty seat at a table, a simple reminder of what was lost. Some betrayals don't need revenge. They just need a spotlight.